Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We're so happy that you were able to join us this evening. And I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Tammy Sands. I am the program manager for Eating for Your Health, formerly and fondly known as Suppers. We are excited to share gut health equals whole health with you this evening. Dr. Julie Pantelick and her patient Marlo Harris have important information and helpful pointers, which they would like to discuss in a casual, comfortable manner this evening. So join in on the valuable conversation and hang in there for a sauerkraut making demonstration. Or feel free to watch the demonstration video when it is convenient for you, as the recording of tonight's program will be provided in approximately 2 weeks, thanks to our videographer, Nate Greenberg, who's also on the call with us. Hi, Nate. I would like to recognize and acknowledge our Executive Director, Marianne Ryanson, and I believe we have one of our board members, Karen Rose Tank, have also joined us this evening. And I would like to invite Marianne to say a few words about Eating for Your Health before I introduce Dr. Pantelick.
Okay. So welcome, everybody. I'm so happy that you're here to learn about gut health and fermented foods and how they're all related and make us just feel better and just be healthier. So at Eating for Your Health, we support people in changing the way that they eat, which transforms their relationship with food. We believe that every person, every body is unique, and that there's no single approach to a food that's right for everyone. So as you know, as many of you already know, we encourage you to explore and experiment with different types of foods and style of eating that reflects your taste, budget, background, and culture. And we emphasize the importance of eating single, whole, fresh ingredients and avoiding processed foods whenever possible. And we don't advocate for one single approach to food or way of eating, just that you try to eat those whole foods. One fun fact, though, that I wanted to share with you today is many of us are familiar with either Mother's Day or Kentucky Derby Day being the day to plant your tomatoes or other vegetables. I learned from Ann McCauley, who's going to be delivering our garden program next week, that today, St. Patrick's Day, is the day to get your peas in the ground. So get your peas in, you could do your lettuce, you could do your arugula and your kale and you know, all those leafy, cold loving greens. We can start them now. So that is exciting to me. But that's just a little tidbit to share with you. And I'm sure we'll learn many other things this evening. So welcome.
Thanks, Marianne. And now it's time to introduce Dr. Julie Pantelick, who will then introduce her patient, Marlo Harris. Dr. Julie Pantelick is a board-certified internal medicine physician. She completed her medical school training at the Philadelphia School of Osteopathic Medicine in 2007, and her residency in internal medicine at St. Peter's University Hospital in New Brunswick, New Jersey in 2010. From 2012 to 2019, she was a member of the internal medicine residency teaching faculty at St. Francis Medical Center in Trenton, New Jersey. In 2019, she joined Dr. Teresa Scherer's integrative medical practice in Dayton, New Jersey. And in 2022, she started her own practice, Princeton Functional Medicine, to help patients get to the root cause of their chronic symptoms. And I think Marlo is going to have a lot to share about her road trip on this one. Dr. Pantelick also studied with the Institute of Functional Medicine and has collaborated with the Suppers program on our Trenton Farmers Market initiatives. And she is a true crusader for the power of nurturing health, the health of our gut. Whew, right? Are we ready to digest? All right, then it's all yours, Julie.
Well, thank you, Tammy and Marianne and Nate and the whole Suppers team, the Eating for Your Health group. So it's great to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity. So before we get started, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about functional medicine, because you'll probably hear me mention that term, and some of you may know what it is and some of you may not. So to define functional medicine, it's a framework used by practitioners with a holistic inclination for addressing the epidemic of chronic disease that is not really being effectively managed by conventional care for lots of reasons. Functional medicine gathers data from a wide variety of conventional and specialized testing to map out a root cause for where the patient's health is at the moment that they come to me, and it helps craft a path back to balance. So if anyone's interested in learning more about this or having a conversation with me after, no worries. You can just email me. It's my first, last name with my initials, DO at the end, @gmail.com. That would be great. And just put gut health webinar in the subject line since we all get a lot of spam these days. Today, I wanted to take you guys on a road trip. It's a conversation about the gut, and like a road trip, there's going to be like the big perspective, and then there's going to be some sort of stopovers where we can stop and look into the Grand Canyon and see what's going on. Please feel free to ask questions as we go. I'd like it to be conversational and not formal. I'm thrilled to be able to share a really lovely gift today with all of you. One of my most committed and engaged patients, Marlo, who is here to tell you a little about her gut road trip that we've taken together. And just as an FYI, this is a presentation that is not to be used for the purposes of medical advice. So thank you. Okay, so our vehicle. We're going to be walking or driving through this great framework, which is eating for your health. It asks 3 questions, which are incredibly valid. So what is it? Why does it matter? And what can you do about it? So what is it? We're going to talk about the gut microbiome. And why does it matter? The functional medicine belief and a lot of recent data shows that diseases are starting in the gut. And the things that we can do about it are many. And it's really a very positive, hopeful philosophy, because really the gut microbiome changes day by day with what we eat. So as you'll see, there's a lot of potential for interrupting the disease process. So you can take when you're talking about food and what food can do to the gut, you can take some things out, you can add some things in, you can change your energy, mood, weight, your toxic burden. You can basically change everything, including your biologic age, not chronologic, biologic age, but you can't take your DNA and change that. However, it's very interesting to note that your microbiome can affect your genetic proclivities. So just a little forewarn. So we've all probably heard of the human microbiome. It's been with us since the dawn of evolution. We have developed a relationship with it. It helps us. We provide it with food and a home. And it starts at birth. It changes daily with our environmental exposures. And the people that we live with, the animals that we live with, whether we're in a city, whether we're in a rural environment, whether we are clean freaks or whether we love to have our hands in the dirt and walk barefoot, it all impacts our microbiome. And the amazing thing is that somewhat like DNA or even fingerprints, we don't yet know that, but it's pretty clear that there's no single microbiome. Everyone has their individual microbiome. So we all have a unique environment that, in the words of Dor Mullen, our data, are the way that we feel is our data. It is truly our data. And so we really need to kind of own that and pay attention to it. So the whole microbiome of the human varies according to the surfaces that you're talking about. So for today's talk, we're going to talk about the gut microbiome. And just for you to see a little bit about what this image means, we've all thought of the human as having organs. And it does have these organs, but we thought that was the end of it. Like, we had these organs, we had to understand how they interrelate. But actually, with all the technologies that have been developed and genetic sequencing combined, we now know there is this enormous amount of data that is super planted and in tight relationship with our own organ system. And in fact, the gut itself has such a sophisticated ecosystem that it's considered an organ of its own. So we have not only our human organs, we have hundreds of trillions of bacterial communities living within us and on us that we depend on. And this, one way to think about it is, there's a sock analogy. You know, if you turn a sock halfway inside out, you have the outside surface would be kind of like your skin. And then where it involutes at the top, that is your GI tract. So everything on your skin is on the outside, and everything inside your GI tract is also on the outside. So we think of it as on the inside, but it is separated from the interior part of our organ systems, our blood and our lymph channels, and the rest of our anatomy. And so there is this very complex and changeable relationship between what is outside of us and what gets inside of us. And the transfer of information from the gut tube to the rest of our body is what we'll be talking about. So the gut microbiome consists of trillions of bacterial families. There's also viruses and fungi and archaea, but we're just going to talk about the microbial communities. And this is a picture on the right of the interior of the intestine. And the small projections you see are villi, and those villi have microvilli on top of them. So there is this enormous absorptive surface on which everything that passes through us is absorbed. And the microbiome is kind of a boundary, and it is involved in the interactions between everything that goes through us from mouth to anus. And there's a relationship between the microbial communities and the cells that line the gut. So if you look at this picture of the human, this shows you that there are these different microbial communities that are lining the oral cavity, the Cyanobacterium, Lactobacillus streptococcus, and Staphylococcus. Those are common in the mouth, and each of these different other groups of bacteria are common in these other areas. There are many more, but these are the largest ones that we talk about. So we have a microbiome, and we know that...
Julie, can I interrupt just 1 second? We have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Somebody had their...
Hey.
Yeah.
Hi, Julie. Would you mind going back one slide? This is Jennifer.
Sure.
So, thank you. Lactobacillus, but I can't pronounce it. Lactobacillus.
Uh-huh.
It's both in the oral cavity, in the stomach,
Yes.
and in the small intestine. So,
Yes.
Non-medical question, like just 101 here. Sometimes when you're buying yogurt, you see the names of bacteria that are in the yogurt.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is that the same as what's here? These bacterial groups?
Mm-hmm.
So if there are, in your previous slide, you had like 23 bajillion trillion listed, it probably doesn't matter that we get a yogurt that has like 2 million
Yeah. So,
You know?
so it's kind of the equivalent question that a lot of people ask. So which probiotic should I take? And I remember going to a conference once, and this is a guy that's like done a lot of research on the microbiome. And he said, well, I take one brand in the morning, one in the afternoon, and one in the evening, hoping that some of them get there alive and that somehow it's helping. So that's kind of like not the answer you want to hear from someone that's doing the research. The reality is that it's a very small percentage of what we have in our body already. And it's not as though you are going to repopulate that entire community, but you are contributing to it.
And doesn't the acidity of the stomach kill some of them anyway? I mean,
yes. So if you have the proper acidity of your stomach, which is another question, but yes. So there is a lot of transformation that happens in the stomach. There are some probiotics that are formulated to survive the acidity of the stomach.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks.
Sure. Great question. So, okay. So here, so why does gut health matter? I know it matters to all of my patients. I know it's mattered to me. I grew up in a family of physicians, and my father had terrible intestinal problems. I've had IBS, for a good part of my life. It's part of modern culture, I would say. And there's a lot of reasons for that. We'll get to some of them. But if you just look at the statistics, and these are really old statistics, chronic constipation, 63 million people. That's a lot. Reflux disease, 20% of the population has weekly symptoms. That's a lot. And so what do we do with those symptoms? Most of us, because it's what we have and what we're used to, we go to the doctor, we say we have the symptoms, and they say, here, take a PPI. That stands for proton pump inhibitor. That decreases the acidity of your stomach, which leads to a lot of problems. But that conversation doesn't really get had. So the reflux may get better, but other things can go awry because the proton pump inhibitor, by its very nature, is decreasing the acidity of the stomach, and that decreases the acidity and the pH of everything that comes after that. So it ends up creating an environment which becomes potentially inhospitable to beneficial bacteria. And that's just one of the problems. So I'm not going to harp on PPIs. But so all of these symptoms are real. All of my patients have some of them, and they can get better. But you have to have the right information, and you have to have confidence that you're not crazy, that it's not in your head, and that you can do something about it. It's really that simple. So why the gut matters? The microbiome seeks balance, as do we. If we would get out of our own way, we seek balance. Dysbiosis is the name that is given for the bacterial communities that are out of balance. So there's a constant territorial struggle in our intestines between the, quote, beneficial bacteria and opportunistic bacteria. And so much of what we do in our daily diets feeds the opportunistic bacteria, laying waste to some of the beneficial bacteria. And so then there's this territorial takeover that is taking place. The other aspect of this is that if this dysbiosis goes on too long, the protective layer of mucus that protects the gut wall, and the gut wall is only one cell thick. So if and it's protected by mucus, which can help protect it from all of the various changes in pH. If that barrier gets broken down, the cell is more exposed to mechanical and chemical forces, and there can be a separation, micro separation from edge to edge. So we call this, there's usually a tight junction, and that tight junction separates ever so slightly. And then molecules that should not be going from outside in the gut tube to the inside, our immune system, get through. And so this creates what's called leaky gut. And as you can see from this slide, it can lead to some of these problems. Hypothyroidism, a lot of these are autoimmune problems, metabolic disorders, diabetes, inflammatory bowel disease. And so when you look at the chronic disease burden of our country and you look at the changes in the food supply and the way that we eat and that the stress levels that we're on, all of these contribute to gut dysbiosis. Next slide. So leaky gut syndrome is, as I say, something that starts, there's multiple reasons. There's dysbiosis, there's poor diet, there's the processed foods. I try to tell my patients, if you can't pronounce the name of what is on the back of the box when you're reading the ingredients, and you don't know what it is, and there's more than 5 or 6 ingredients, you shouldn't be eating it. The other thing that I'm starting to say is, when was the last time what was in that box was alive? Probably a long time ago. So that is considered processed food. And in the realm of functional medicine, it's considered an anti-nutrient. It not only does not serve you, it actually costs you to process it. So on top of that, you add things like sugar and dairy products and genetically modified foods. You add stress that can, inhibit the immune system, and you add the toxic overload, which we are all bombarded with. There's 80,000 chemicals and other toxic substances in our environment, most of which have never been studied singly, much less in combination. And then you add in all the medications that we take, either over the counter or given by physicians, and the quality of our water, whether it's been, cleaned with chlorine, or whether there's fluoride. I mean, it's a whole lot of complications about water, but let's stay with the gut for the moment. So this picture on the right is just kind of giving you an example of the tight junctions. So the tight junctions are these little red binders, and then when they break down, the area between opens up and pathogens can cross. And there are many pathogens in the actual stool. So some of those pathogens produce something called LPS, lipopolysaccharide, and that is something that can slip through and cause an inflammatory response. I saw that somebody asked about dairy. Dairy has a lot of hormones in it because it's actually meant for a baby cow. And on top of that, a lot of those cows are given antibiotics, they're given growth hormones. And so all of that interferes with our own hormonal system. And the microbiome is thought to actually mediate hormones as well on a level we still don't know. So that's one aspect. And then dairy is mucus producing. It's inflammatory. Not everybody responds that way to it, but it's something that if someone comes to me and they're having a lot of symptoms, it's something that I would take away. And it's remarkable how frequently their symptoms go away. I've had many patients come to me with rashes that just would not go away, and they stopped dairy and, they went away. So I can't say cause and effect is clear, but a lot of this is experimenting, and everybody's microbiome is different, everybody's DNA is different, and everybody's going to respond to foods differently. So it makes it very hard to give clear advice, because it's really an individual experience.
Yeah, there's another question kind of similar,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
maybe that your last statement might answer it, but somebody's asking, do you find chocolate also can produce mucus like dairy does?
Again, this is something that really you'd have to look at how the chocolate is made. So a lot of chocolate is made with milk. If you're looking specifically for chocolate that is not made with milk, I would just do an experiment with yourself and see if you notice a difference. That's the best advice I could give. So this is just a list of some of the things that we've mentioned that are causes of leaky gut. It's just a visual to remember. Dietary toxins like hydrogenated oils, chronic stress. I remember in medical school, we were being taught the causes of cardiovascular disease, and number one on the list was stress. And when we discussed the treatment, nobody talked about number one because nobody knew exactly what to say about it. So there's a lot to be said about stress, and it's something we all are struggling with, but it is a serious burden. Low stomach acid. So a lot of people are on PPIs, and I had this one patient that came to me because she had been put on a PPI about 20 years prior. She didn't really think she had reflux, but the doctor thought she had reflux. Anyway, she's on the PPI for about 20 years. She came to me and she was also now showing signs of osteoporosis. So PPIs that is one of the risks of being on a PPI. And so there are ways to get off of them. And the irony is that a lot of people are actually put on them, but the problem is that they have low stomach acid innately. As we age, our stomach acid production starts to decrease. And so if food is sitting in your stomach longer, and there's lots of reasons food can sit in your stomach longer than it should, one of them is insufficient acid production innately, then you can try taking digestive enzymes, which add to the digestive process, and maybe then you wouldn't have any of your symptoms and wouldn't have needed the PPI. And so we know some of these other things, obviously antibiotics. We talked a little bit about medications. Alcohol is very inflammatory. I'm sorry, I know I like beer too, but it's really not good for you if you're thinking about your gut microbiome. And C-section births, I had a C-section and it's something that I think about a lot. So, but there's other sources of microbiome richness in our lives. So why does it matter? The gut wall, the microbiome, and the gut-brain axis. So a lot of you have also probably heard there's something called the gut-brain axis. There is, and it is the vagus nerve. That is the biggest nerve that goes from the brain to the gut. And when these studies have been done, they have found that gut bacteria both produce and respond to the same neurochemicals that we use in our brain. So they both produce them and they use them to communicate. So these include GABA, serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine, acetylcholine, and melatonin. And the brain uses these to regulate learning, memory, and mood. And so when those are issues in someone's life, it's important to look at the gut. And just because you have an imbalance in your gut does not necessarily mean you're going to have gut symptoms. So a lot of people may have no gut symptoms and think they're absolutely fine, but they may have these other manifestations. And so that's something that's really important to look at. The gut produces 95% of our serotonin, which is also involved in GI activity. And there's 100 million neurons embedded in the gut wall. So it is really its own nervous system. So this gut feeling is actually a real neurologic experience, and it's really quite a remarkable thing when you realize that there is this gut-brain connection, and that there's a field called nutritional psychiatry, where they really are looking at food as a way to manage mental illness, anxiety, and depression. But again, before you need to go look for that specialist, I would actually think it would be smarter to just look at your own diet and experiment. Yeah.
We have a question. There's a product called Restore, also known as Dirt Water. That's been recommended by Dr. Zach Bush. This product is supposed to heal the junctions and keep the junctions tight. Are you familiar with this product? And if so, do you have any comments regarding it?
So I am familiar with it. I think it's pretty darn exciting. I don't know if it works, but I have a lot of respect for Dr. Zach Bush. So it's certainly something worth trying. It can't hurt. I mean, it really can't. There's lots of things that we take over the counter, like NSAIDs. I would say don't take NSAIDs. Dirt water, I would say go for it because it's, yeah. Why it matters. So the other reason, if it, it's just important to know, is that the gut microbiome can also act as a genetic switch. This kind of blew me away when I heard about this because, we have grown up in an era where DNA was, everything. Your future was determined by your DNA. Actually, that's not so. The DNA, it turns out, is a guide. And so it's especially important for people that feel like they're at serious risk of diseases to not feel like they have some sort of predetermined destiny, that actually what you do every day of your life can help change your destiny, especially as regards food. So there's lots of aspects of what we consider to be health. Food is by far the most fundamental, and we do it 3 to more times a day. So that's something we can control. Research on the microbiome, for example, showed that chemicals produced by bacteria in the gut from the digestion of fruits and vegetables affect the genes in the human cells that line our gut. So these bacterial genes affected the human genes, and they produced, the product that they produced was called short-chain fatty acids. And this shows that there is a relationship. Studies also show that the health of our mucosal immune system, so 70% of our immune system is actually in our gut mucosa. It's called gut-associated lymphoid tissue, and that's extremely important in this, during viral pandemics. And the integrity of the epithelial lining of our gut, its motility, and its nutrient absorption are also controlled by the microbiome. So it's not clear how impactful this is for any one individual. And I was just watching this YouTube video from 2019. Dr. Rob Knight, I believe from Stanford, who's a huge, leader in this field. He said that 1 tablespoon of stool had so much microbial DNA information on it that you would need something like a truckload of CDs just for that 1 tablespoon of stool. So we are talking data, big data. This would be big data down the road that if we can manage big data and start to see patterns, it's at that point that we'll start to see more clear cause and effect relationships between, literally what we eat and literally how we feel. But in between now and then, there's a lot that we can do, and we don't have to feel like science has to rule us. We have to feel our bodies, and more importantly, pay attention to how we feel, because I think that's one of the things that I find most difficult, is trying to explain to someone that they have to pay attention to what they eat and how it makes them feel, because there is a relationship, and we just have sort of become desensitized because we're just running constantly all the time. And so this is just a diagram showing that there is a relationship that was shown when they were studying this in trends of parasitology. So it's another indicator that there is a relationship between the DNA and the microbiome and its communication and effect on our human genome. So what can we do about feeding your microbiome? I think, I guess, when you're pregnant, you're taught to think about the concept that you're feeding yourself +1 or 2 if you have twins. But here we're feeding trillions. So it's really it's kind of a crazy thought. Who would have figured? But it's super important, and what the microbial community wants is fiber. It's like really so simple. They just want plant fiber. They want as many and as different a fiber as you can find, and they want it every day, every meal, and that could lead to a lot of improvement in all of our health. And so, with the growth of big farms and big cattle and big pharmaceuticals, we are all kind of being sort of very parallel, in fact, to what's happening to our soil with big agribusiness. We are not replenishing the microbial communities in our soil. The plants are not as resilient or as nutritious. And so even when we think we're having a nutritious plant-filled meal, you have to take that into account. So there's this parallel universe happening. Our soil is depleted and our internal soil is depleted. And we just have to try to take control of it somehow. And fiber is something that we can add. So just a note on fiber, you want to add fiber in your diet in slow increments. I'm not talking Metamucil, although Metamucil is a fiber too, and there's lots of additive fibers that you can use. There's acacia, there's guar gum, there's prune, there's pectin, there's lots of different kinds of fiber. Any one of those additions of fiber, I'm not talking like brown rice, but an addition, you want to really, if it says, 4 capsules a day, you want to take 1 capsule every day for 3 days, and then gradually increase it over the next 3 days, et cetera, because your microbiome is like having a feeding frenzy. It's like pouring some kind of a fertilizer on your plant. It's going to go kind of haywire. And so you may feel that as bloating or gas or sort of being full and unable to eat. And that's just because your gut is happy and transitioning. So what can we do to support the gut microbiome? So eat more fiber, the colors of the rainbow, any way that you cook it or saute it, likely not fried. If you're going to use frying, think of the oils that do well at high temperatures. Fermented is really a great way to get food. It's been used to preserve food for thousands of years, and it's very safe, and there's lots of really cool books out there on fermentation. When you're going to eat the skin, try to eat organic. If you're not going to eat the skin, you don't need to eat organic. Well, for example, potatoes. Potatoes are very, they have been grown for so long. There's lots of potato preferring bugs that have to be kept off. So they're non-organic potatoes are, there's a lot of pesticides used on them. So I would always use potatoes that were organic. Stay away from feedlot meat. Change your idea of breakfast. Have some dinner tossed with an egg. Get away from refined foods, refined white foods, and your conventional bagel is probably the worst thing you can have for breakfast. Sorry, I know there's a lot of bagel lovers out there, but you'll see the difference. How do you feel after you have a bagel? Did you want to take a nap? Yeah, probably. What is feedlot meat? Okay, so feedlot meat is animals that are raised in large farms, edge to edge, with no, access to a natural environment. Because they are raised in tight quarters, they're usually given antibiotics because it's unhealthy for them to be in such tight quarters. And then they're usually given hormones, which they're given to increase the weight of the meat and the amount that the farmer is going to make on the sale. So it ends up producing a very unhealthy animal, and we absorb the hormones and the antibiotics into our own system. And so we're just basically, the quality of their life and their nutrition is transferred to us, just like it is from the plant that's grown in depleted soil with fertilizers. Yeah. So organic, free range, grass fed, if you're going to eat meat, for sure. And farmed fish, same idea. They're often given animal parts. Eliminate as many chemicals in your environment, your food, air, and water. I mean, don't go crazy. It's impossible. We live in an environment that it's just toxic. It's just toxic. We have a huge capacity to manage it. Our livers are phenomenal. Our breathing detoxifies us. But the question is, how effective are you at getting out there and doing it? Are you running? Are you cycling? Are you sweating? Are you getting the toxins out? Toxins leave through sweat. And if, you can get a sauna, you can get a UV sauna, but you want to sweat out the toxins and you want to move your gut. So this question comes up all the time. So prebiotics, probiotics, postbiotics. Okay, so probiotics are what we all kind of grew up with. They're the things on the shelves. There's lots of different kinds. They could be considered a drop in the bucket, or you can actually take them and feel like a remarkable difference. What do I mean? So a lot of people suffer from constipation, bloating, gas, belly pain. The probiotics, there's so many different strains that are in them, and you will individually need to experiment to see which makes you feel better, but there is a difference if you find the right one for your own body. They are not harmful. They may not be of value, so you want to experiment in a way that you can afford to experiment. Obviously, you just don't want to, feel that's your only option. If you can't afford the, probiotics, you can make, sauerkraut, and that's a source of lactobacilli. So that's a great option. But probiotics are the bacteria that are going to produce the fermentation process in our gut. The prebiotic is the food for the probiotic, and those are resistant starches. And there's a long list of resistant starches that I can add to this to the end of this webinar. If you guys want a copy of it, there'll be a list of prebiotics that you could use, and they are things that you can buy in the grocery store, in the vegetable area. And then postbiotics are what is made by the probiotic, and the postbiotic is really the reason we want to have the probiotic and the prebiotic, because the postbiotic is the product of this fermentation that happens in our gut, and that is so that is our source of many things, mostly anti-inflammatory compounds that help us with our own health. So we feed the bacteria and they give us the postbiotics. That's basically the relationship. And then there are fermented foods. Someone was asking, can it survive your stomach? So I don't know the exact answer to that, but it definitely has a lot of other benefits. It can improve digestion. It acts on the pH. It can increase the vitamin content in your food, and it can help with heart disease and high blood pressure. It can help if you are lactose malabsorptive. Not a lot of people can actually digest lactose, so that may help. And then it's super easy and cost effective to ferment your own foods, and it's really satisfying. So what can we do to support our microbiomes? These are things to eliminate. This is a long list. I'm just going to say antibiotics, NSAIDs if you can find alternatives. Try to get off your proton pump inhibitors. Ask your doctor for help. There are lots of ways to do it. And try to stay away from glyphosate. And the thing that we can all really control is not eating on the run, chewing, because digestion begins in your mouth. And if you're chewing, a bite of food a few times and swallowing, you're leaving the digestive process for the chemical and mechanical process in your stomach, which puts extra work on it. And sleep is huge. So take care of your microbiome so we can take care of you. Okay, Marlo. So Marlo is, she's a remarkable person. She recognized something was wrong and she did not take no for an answer. She looked till she found something that worked for her. And I just want her to tell you a little bit about her experience with her body. And tell us your story, Marlo.
Okay. Hi. So my name is Marlo Harris. I've been a patient of Dr. Julie Pantelick for about 10 months now. So prior to meeting Dr. Pantelick, I had experienced chronic abdominal pain. And I've always been an individual who always paid attention to my body and took care of my health. But for some reason, I just continued to ignore pain that I was experiencing. So prior to meeting Dr. Julie, I would say for about a good year and a half, I was experiencing this pain in my abdominal area, which got progressively worse. I had the worst brain fog. I felt like a hamster that was just spinning on a wheel. I would sit at a table and stare at papers, and I literally felt like I was losing my mind. Also, in addition to that, I was in the midst of perimenopause, right? So it was the worst I had ever felt in my life. I thought I was ready to just totally check out. So I had gone to all these different doctors. I went to my OBGYN, and let me note at this time I had all male doctors, right? And so my OBGYN, he told me it was stress. And I kept telling him, no, it's not stress. I'm not stressing from COVID. I know something's wrong. So like I mentioned, I was going through perimenopause. I had fibroids. It got so worse that things were coming out of my eyes. I went to the eye doctor. He told me I had blepharitis, but all my male doctors kept telling me it was stress. And I knew it wasn't stress because I wasn't stressed from COVID. So I just continued down this path, and I was like, nobody's listening, but I know my body. And that's the key. You have to listen to your body. Your body will tell you everything. If you don't pay attention to your body, you'll be lost, because that's one thing I've always learned for me, pay attention to my body. And that's what I didn't do. I let a year and a half go by, which was so unlike me, because usually when I pay attention to my body and it tells me something, I immediately go to the doctor, but I didn't. So between the eye doctor, the OBGYN, my male primary care physician, everybody kept saying it was stress. So I said, you know what? I'm going to take time and I'm going to invest in me. And so I heard about the concierge medical service, and I started doing my research and everything. And I found Dr. Pantelick. And when I read her bio, so originally I was going to the practice where she was, and I wanted the other physician who was there. My son's dental hygienist, she was a patient of the other doctor, but they told me she wasn't taking anyone. So make a long story short, I read Dr. Julie's bio and I was like, oh my God, perfect fit. But let me say this also, I prayed throughout this whole time because I seek God first in everything that I do. So I just continued to pray. And when the doctors weren't listening to me, I was like, God, just please help me, lead me the right path, just guide me. And then I found Dr. Julie, I read her bio, and we immediately connected. She was so patient and caring, and she listened to me. I literally cried the first time I was on the phone with her. She spent 2 hours on the phone with me. She listened to everything I had to say. She understood everything that I was experiencing. So we started down that path. And then a couple weeks later, I went into her office. She spent another 2 hours with me, right? And it's all about quality care, right? And you have to do your homework. And when you find the right doctor, you'll know, right? You not only your mental capacity, but even, what do we say, our internal gut. Your internal gut tells you too. So I knew she was a perfect fit for me. And then she spent 2 hours with me in the office, and she came up with a plan, right? And I will tell you, through this journey, like sometimes I've gotten frustrated, but I always go back and you reset, and I tell myself, just trust the process. Just trust the process. And it will get hard sometimes. And so through this 10 months, I have trusted the process. And I'm so happy to say I am in such a better place. The chronic abdominal pain is gone. And when I say chronic abdominal pain, every time I ate, I was in pain. I didn't want to eat because I was so worried about the pain that I was going to feel. And so Dr. Julie and I, we started out with a stool test, which gave us so much information. And we learned some things. And I got some improvement, a lot of improvement. But then all of a sudden, my symptoms, they came back. And then I called her. And then she said to me, well, let's do a SIBO test. And I was like, okay, that's another test, right? But I was investing in me and my health, right? You have to make yourself a priority. So I went ahead and I did the SIBO test, and that came back positive. And what was so striking to me, because when I mentioned to you, like I let so much time go past, and Dr. Julie educates me literally on everything. Whatever process we go through, she educates me. So that's the kind of doctor you have to find, someone who is willing to take the time, listen to you, right? And just be there for you 100%. So we did the SIBO test. The numbers came back at 287. They were supposed to be less than 12. And I said, oh my God, had I not waited a year and a half, my numbers probably would have been lower, but I couldn't change that, right? So then you could tell Dr. Julie, then what we did.
Yeah, it's a complicated set of steps, but essentially, let me just explain what I think was going on. So constipation is a really common problem. There's lots of reasons for it. In the case of Marlo, she had her usual bowel habit was once to twice a week. And there are a lot of people that I see that start out at that place. And what I know is that we need to get to the place where we have 1 to twice a day, because that's a key part of the detoxing of our body. So when the gut is not activating, the bacteria is not allowed to evacuate through the system. And so it crawls, it like moves back from the colon into the small intestine, and it sort of populates an area of the body that it shouldn't be. So what we had to do was there's a number of ways to treat it with a very restrictive low FODMAPs diet, while you take antibacterials, either, pharmaceutical or botanical, or you can do something that's called an elemental diet. But what was so amazing about Marlo is that she, like most people would probably say, no, I don't think I'm going to do the elemental diet, because it's like you can't eat any food for 2 weeks and you're like drinking this liquid shake, every day. Like that sounds disgusting. But she said, I don't want to be on this diet for 2 to 3 months. Let's just get it done and over with. And she did her job. She did such great work. And when we redid the test, it came down, it was like, I don't know, it was less than 100.
From 287 down to 87.
Yeah.
And like what Dr. Pantelick said, like one of the options was an antibiotic, but I don't believe in prescription medication unless it's absolutely necessary. That has just always been me, right? And so antibiotics is just not good for the stomach at all. So I just said to Dr. Julie, let's just, whatever I have to do, I'll do it. And just to share a story, every day I told myself, day 2 was day 1, day 3, I said to myself, just get through it. It's day 1. And then by week 2, I was like, all right, this is no longer day 1. I'm ready to get this over with. It was extremely challenging not to digest any food for 2 weeks, but I trusted the process and I knew it wasn't going to kill me. And in the end, we had such a significant positive result.
And did you lose weight?
I lost 20 pounds, and from losing, which scared me a little bit, but after losing 20 pounds, I even explained to Dr. Julie, like there was a time when I would stand in my kitchen or stand anywhere and the bottoms of my feet would be in so much pain. I had so much inflammation in my body, like I would ache all over. And after going through that 2-week process of this elemental diet, and until today, unless I eat the wrong thing, I have absolutely no inflammation in my body. I am so grateful to share. I have no more brain fog. When I tell you I couldn't function mentally, I couldn't function mentally. I went into such a depression because I would literally just sit and I felt like I was losing my mind. That is all gone. So we're still on our journey. Yeah.
Yeah. I also want to say that, Marla, you've had a very stressful life, which is very similar to so many women and men in this audience. You have a teenage son. We're getting him to soccer practices. There's all sorts of challenges trying to, take care of yourself and take care of the family. And a lot of the time when we spoke, the first thing you would say is, something was like not quite where you wanted it to be in your gut. And then you would tell me about how much stress you were under. And the relationship became pretty interesting to see that when you were feeling stress, you were feeling something in your gut. And so the process, I think, helped you to see that there's a relationship between our stress and what we feel in our gut.
There's absolutely connection between stress and the gut. And I'm the first to say, when I'm stressed, I feel it in the gut. There's a burning sensation. So I am conscious and aware of that. I go meditate, or I get control. I gain control, and I realize that, right? At the end of the day, right? You can't let stress control you. It's easier said than done. But if you're conscious and aware of it and you practice, right, then that's the only way you'll get better with it. And yes, a 17-year-old who goes to school 40 minutes away, and all kinds of sports and training, college visits, right? And I'm a stay-at-home mom, but it's still the same thing, whether it's stay-at-home mom or someone who has a career. Again, it goes back to, you're no good for anybody else or your household unless you're good. Your household will suffer if you're not good. So you have to prioritize and make yourself the priority first and take care of you, because you can't take care of anyone else if you don't put yourself first. And a lot of times we feel guilty, but you shouldn't feel guilty, right? They'll survive.
Yeah, I know. It is hard.
It is hard, but they'll survive. And I've learned.
Yeah.
So, Marlo, I think one of the other things that you highlighted when we were speaking was about educating yourself, right? So you didn't just rely on Dr. Pantelick, like she would give you this good information and then you would go and research it. So I can imagine that you didn't know what SIBO was. So I don't know, you guys maybe want to say that acronym, Dr. Julie, for the audience, because those are the kind of things I remember, Marlo, that you shared, and that you did your homework too. You really, you listened to Dr. Pantelick and you guys had a plan together.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a collaboration between you and your doctor, because at the end of the day, all doctors are practicing medicine, right? And so the doctor gives you information, but you also can't just solely rely on the doctor, right? You have to be willing to do your own homework, right? Dr. Julie's always available to me. If I have a question, there's many times I have a question, I understand something, I'll say, I'm about to have this test. Can you explain what this is? And what are the risks and what are the benefits? So when you're looking for a physician, that's the kind of physician you're looking for, someone you can collaborate with, and someone who takes the time to educate you. I mean, Dr. Julie is even like a visual teacher, right? You don't understand. I remember in her office, she would draw pictures for me, right? So, yeah.
So much about, I think what was really great for me to see in Marlo is that she really learned a lot about paying attention to her body when she put in different foods. And she could tell when she would eat something that did not agree with her. She was having these rashes on her face and in different parts of her arm. And when she eliminated certain foods, she had a huge improvement. So again, it's hard to say, it's like really impossible to generalize what those foods will be for any particular person. But it's called an elimination diet. That elimination diet is quite tedious to go through, but it is full of, informative and, data. And that's what Eating for Your Health really supports. And, Dora Mullen, I'm sorry you didn't get to meet her, Marla, but she was really incredible. She really believed that how you feel is data, and you need to use that data and apply it so that you can make best guesses for yourself. So it's a great philosophy.
Thank you so much. That was a good note to end on. I don't see any questions in the chat, but of course, if you have them, feel free to put them in. We are a little over time, and I just want to acknowledge that. So those of you that have to leave or would like to leave the call, go ahead and do that. We will show the demonstration video for the kraut making. And for those of you that do need to leave, it's okay, because you'll get the link to this whole recording, which will also have the demonstration included in that. So you'll get that in about approximately 2 weeks. So I just wanted to offer that up. So I do see there is like one question here. Is yogurt good for gut since it's dairy?
So I want to make it really clear that there is no one guide for everybody, honestly. The things that I can tell you for sure you should get rid of are things like preservatives, colorings, extra sugar, processed flour. But there is a lot of benefit to yogurt. It's been used for hundreds, thousands of years. I don't know, as long as they've been milking animals. It's powerful. So if you're thinking about yogurt versus, something more synthetic, there's no comparison, right? So you do your best with what you have access to, and really important not to make radical changes. You need to make micro changes and attach a new habit to something you're already doing. And in that way, you will likely to have longer lasting pattern changes. So first, eliminate the low hanging fruit. What do you not need? Okay, so maybe I don't need Snickers bars. Maybe I really don't need, peanut M&Ms. I probably don't even need oatmeal cookies. So if you eliminate some of those things, you'll start to see the difference, because all of those have a lot of complex ingredients that are anti-nutrients, and your body, what's also interesting when you start to read the microbiome research, and there's endless amounts of microbiome research, the microbiome, they feel, is able to trigger the human to eat what the microbiome wants. Hello? So your cravings may be coming from your microbiome and not, your own desires. So said another way, if you change what you're eating, you will no longer crave those things. So give that a try.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to thank both of you, Dr. Julie Pantelick and Marlo Harris. It's been wonderful to have you and all this great information, and thanks for the personal touch to it as well. There's been so much good information to digest, hey? I want to just remind everybody about some of our upcoming courses. Marion mentioned one of them with the garden, and we have others coming up. If you want to click on our link on our website under our calendar and events, we have all kinds of good stuff coming up. I don't want to take too much more time, but then I'm just going to ask Nate to start the demonstration video. So those of you that would like to see the kraut making, since it's St. Patty's Day, let's do that.
Hi, everybody. I'm Julie Pantelick, and I'm going to be showing you how to make sauerkraut. It's really very straightforward, so I'll just take you step by step. I'll just show you what I have laid out, because it's always a great idea to lay everything out in advance. So I have a sharpener for my knife. And I have a funnel, which I'll use to put the sauerkraut into the jar. And I have the jars over here, which I'll sterilize. I have my kosher salt, which is here. Sort of opens up like this. My measuring spoons and some gauze that will go over the top. It's cheesecloth and some twine. So I went to the farmer's market this morning and I bought this beautiful cabbage. So I'm going to take off the leaves, the outer leaves, and I'm going to wash this off. I've already washed the cutting board and the knife. I'm also going to wash my hands. I've washed them once, but I'll wash them again because that's what you should do. 1 second. Okay, so we've washed the outer part of the cabbage. And what you're trying to do is eliminate the opportunistic bacteria that might exist, and you're going to allow the beneficial bacteria a stronger hold. So the first thing you would do is you would cut this. You know, everybody's got their own preferred knife. My husband loves really big knives, and I can't really handle a big knife, so I use a smaller knife. So you cut it in half, and this is the core that you're going to take out. So you take the tip, and you kind of cut it like that, and like that, just sort of making a triangle. And this is really great to chew on when you're not in front of a camera. And then do that on the other side. And you kind of get it, you sort of cut a wedge, and then you take that out. And now you're going to cut it in eighths. So I'm going to cut these pieces in smaller wedges. And there's nothing perfect about this process. It's just cutting it into small enough pieces that you can massage it with the salt, and it's all going to wilt anyway. So no worries about any perfectionism here. So you just cut it into wedges as best you can. You'll end up with this big mess. So I'm just going to, because my cutting board is so small, I'm going to just take some of these wedges, put them this, and put the knife perpendicular to the length that I cut before, and then just cut it up. And then you take this cut part and you put it in the bowl. It's all going to wilt, so there's really no worries about how big or small the pieces are. So the actual Lactobacillus spores that you want to take hold exist in our environment and exist on the inner layers of the cabbage, and that is what is going to cause the fermentation. And it's a totally safe fermentation process. It's been done for hundreds, if not thousands of years in one way or another. So it's not like we've invented it, we're just rediscovering it. So you cut up all the cabbage. And my bowl is not going to be big enough for all this cabbage. You don't need to use it all. It may not actually fit into the jar, so I might just leave this here for now. Then I'm going to take the salt. Take a tablespoon of salt. You don't have to get too specific. And then, this is the fun part, then you sort of massage it. And this may take 5-10 minutes. And what you're trying to do is you're really squeezing hard because you're trying to get the juices to form through the salt and the squeezing of this process. You can also let it sit for a minute and come back. This is a great antidote to sitting at your computer and using your keyboard for too many hours. You want to get really physical with it. You'll see it starts to get very moist, and that's what you want. And you can always mix other vegetables in, and you can use different kinds of cabbage as well. You can use Napa cabbage, red cabbage, Savoy cabbage. And of course, you can also add carrots, shredded carrots, or slices of carrot. You can do radishes. You can add daikon. You can add hot, jalapenos. You can add beets. You can just make beet cabbage. So it's starting to get really wet. I don't know if you can see that. It's not quite as liquidy as you want it, but it's definitely getting there. So I'm going to let it sit for a minute while I sterilize my jar. And over here I have a pot of boiling water. And this has been washed with soap and water. So I'm going to stick it in the pot. Again, this is not a canning process. You don't technically really need to do this. But what it does is it washes off the soap residue and just gets rid of any opportunistic bacteria that might have gotten in while it was on the shelf. And this is a weight. I just have some pebbles that are washed. I'm also going to dip this in the water. Since that will be sitting on the cabbage, you want to be sure that that is also clean. It's a little heavy, I have to help it along. And then I'm going to let that dry. So then we're back at the cabbage. It's starting to really get moist. Now, if there isn't enough water, you can add water. So the next step is you take a funnel, which I'm also going to dip in the boiling water, and you take your jar and you put it over here, and you just start filling this up. Now you can add caraway seeds as well, but I'm just doing the simplest version possible so that you don't have to feel overwhelmed with the ingredients that are feasible. I mean, many of you have probably made cabbage before, sauerkraut before, but if you haven't, just start simple. Just get some confidence in the simplest approach. Now you see this is already filling this jar up, right? So that's where you take what is basically a weight and you press down. Let's see if you can see that. You're really just trying to pack. I'm going to put this here. Let's pack some more in. And then you pack again. And the other purpose of this is that once you put some water in here, you want it to stay submerged. You want the cabbage to be submerged at all times. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get some water, and I'll just put a little bit more of this in here because it will shrink down. You know how when you saute a big whole bag of spinach and it turns into half a cup? Kind of the same thing that's going to happen here. And that was a small cabbage, so don't feel like it's a perfect science. It's just experimenting. And then you have extra. You can mix that with other vegetables if you want to create a different kind of fermented vegetable. So I'm going to stop here. I'm going to get some water and I'm going to fill this up. Pour water in so that it's submerged, so that when I put the weight in, the cabbage is submerged. Now, the thing you're going to want to do for the first 24 hours as this salt starts to work is you want to keep coming back like every hour or two while you're awake and keep submerging it. Keep pressing down so that it's covered by liquid. And that's pretty much the stopping point for now. So the next step is you want to put this cheesecloth over it, and it's not going to look beautiful, but the concept here is that this is just a weight. You want the air, which has all of the beneficial bacteria in it, as well as what is on the surface of the cabbage. You want it to get airflow, but you don't want dust, or in the case of animals, we have dogs, so I don't want any dog hairs in here. So I'm going to take this twine and just tie it around. And then I will come back and press on my weight every couple of hours. And I'll take some pictures over the next few days to show you how it's progressing. And there you have it.
Thank you. And thanks, Nate, for manning the videos and slides for us this evening. And thanks to those that have stayed on. Quite a few of you have, so thanks you for that. That's wonderful. I just wanted to open up if there were any questions with regard to the kraut demonstration. And if not, again, just to remind everybody that you will have access to that within approximately 2 weeks. I know there was I don't see any about the kraut, but there was an additional question about the oatmeal in the chat, Julie, about probiotic. And what does the probiotic do in soaking the oatmeal?
Yeah, so I was just actually answering that. So the probiotic just enables some of the beneficial bacteria to kind of ferment a little bit in the oatmeal overnight. And soaking the oats, you're not quite sprouting it, but you're sort of softening it and enabling it to be a little bit better digested. You can eat it raw or you can cook it. And then when you cook it, you would just add some more of the coconut milk or the almond milk, whichever you preferred. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Thanks for answering that. I think that's all the questions then. And again, thank you to both you and Marlo. It was really wonderful, very informative, and I love the demonstration at the end. Can't go make my kraut.
I did want to say you can also create a brine if you didn't want to just use water. There's lots of recipes for just brine, which is basically salt in the water. So I'm not sure that was technically right just to use water, but there were lots of different recipes because I've been reading about brining lately, so I did wonder about that.
Yeah, for sure. All right, everyone. Good night. Thank you for joining us.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie and Marlo.
You're
Hope to see you
welcome.
soon.
Hi.
Thank you.
Okay.